I'm hoping the Big Ten has to modify their system for us.
Probably like getting grade 10 sandpaper rubbed on your face every day.
I mean, we say it all the time, whether, there's two types of turds, you're a sinker or you're a floater, but you're still a turd, right? I mean,
We are about players and players playing the plays and not necessarily the plays.
Welcome to the Varsity Club podcast. My name is Derek Peterson. Quick note on last week, there was no podcast. I had planned to do things myself Thursday afternoon, and then Apple dropped the Big Sur software update, and that completely bricked both my laptop and my desktop for like a 5-hour window. So like I had planned to do things on my own, and I had some other stuff going on that I needed to be home for. And then like Apple was like, nope, you're not going to do that. So had to cancel with my guests and just try to get like my computer to work. I've learned my lesson. I'm back in our studio this week with the professionals. Pat is producing today. Thanks for being here, Pat. Quick plug for our website. Make sure that you're subscribed to all of Varsity's podcast offerings. We have something new every day from all of your favorite voices. And I also want to give a big shout out and a welcome to the guys at the Go Big Redcast for joining the Hurrdat Media family. That podcast is great, and those guys are all friends of the pod over here, so welcome to the family. Also, this month's magazine is hitting newsstands and mailboxes soon, if you don't already have it. Keep an eye out for it. You'll want this issue. Not only will there be, you'll get stuff on Nebraska's first win of 2020, but I also have a long-form piece in there that I've been working on for months. I haven't had something in the magazine, not something extensive in the magazine for a little bit. I've been working on this, and I'm really excited for everyone to read it. I think it'll be a surprise, but hopefully a good surprise for our regular audience. And that is all that I will say. Illinois, in a few minutes, we'll hear from Bob Asmussen from IlliniHQ and the News-Gazette. He'll give us some insight into this weekend's game. It's another morning kickoff, which, first I want to do this aside because I want to say that morning kickoffs aren't necessarily a bad thing for Nebraska. They've gotten, I think, every single game that they've played so far this season has been a morning kickoff. They were supposed to do a 2:30 against Wisconsin, but then that one was canceled. Everything else has been a morning. Given Nebraska's regular practice time, like an 11 a.m. kick is probably best anyway. I don't know many coaches who honestly like sitting around and waiting all day to play a football game, and with no atmosphere to give you kind of the boost that a traditional night game would give you. Like a night game around here is really kind of pointless anyway. Nebraska's probably better served with the early slot. So Illinois.
They hit the crap out of us last year.
Nebraska can't overlook this group. I don't think Nebraska's in a position really to be overlooking anyone. And to be fair, I don't think they will here. Both programs got their first win of the new year last weekend. Illinois beat Rutgers. It was close to coming back on Purdue, but it couldn't get it done. It got blasted by Wisconsin in the opener, and then got blasted by Minnesota 2 weeks after that. Nebraska could blow this group out. Like, it could. The defense is playing well enough, and when you pair that with some of the COVID issues that Illinois had, guys still kind of making their way back, this is an Illinois offense that's pretty similar to Nebraska in that it's really struggled to put points on the board for a litany of reasons. Nebraska could come out of this Saturday with sort of like a stackable performance if you kind of think about it. So you have a nice showing against Northwestern for 3 quarters. You can't close. You have a great performance against Penn State, and you made plays. And you finally were able to close. The emphasis this week was on starting fast. And let me say, great defensively. It wasn't great offensively. They still have work to do but great defensively. The emphasis this week was starting fast on both sides of the ball. Starting fast on defense, starting fast on offense. Nebraska's given up points on 2 of its 3 game-opening possessions for the other team. The defense has. So that's an emphasis this week. If Nebraska can get that under control, Nebraska could actually put this game to bed early, I think. And it hasn't done a ton of that. And it's not really, like, you'll hear this in the interview with Bob Asmussen, and I thought it was a really good comment where, like, Nebraska's not in a position where it's blowing teams out by 40 points anymore, which is, I think, spot on. That's just not where they are in their they're kind of, I want to say rebuild, but I don't know if we should call it a rebuild and instead should probably just call it like a build. The offense needs to be better, and I think it will be. Luke McCaffrey was fine in this first start, and he'll build. They just need to be more consistent. Here is Matt Lubick on Luke's first start.
Well, first, I thought he handled it unbelievably well. We knew that he was a competitor. We knew he was he's a great athlete. He's been making plays all fall camp long with his feet and with his arm. But sometimes you really don't know until there's live bullets how a guy's going to respond. And I was very impressed with his poise. He stood in there. He improvised a little bit when we needed him to. He kept some long, some third down, some second long situations alive just by making a play himself. Never panicked. Showed a ton of poise, and not just for a first starter, but we forget he's basically a freshman. And so, could not be more happy with what he did in the game. Now he's been doing that the whole time in fall camp, and that's why, we chose to start him. But at the same time, it's a different thing to go out on Saturday and do the same thing, and that's against a good defensive football team. I think people sometimes forget that. Those guys are going to win some games this year. That's a good defensive football team, and it looked like he'd been in there for a long time playing football. So I was very pleased, as we all were.
Yeah, so like everybody says, I think they kind of latched on to, well, not latched on, but a handful of people kind of heard Lubick say, that's a good football team, and thought, well, Penn State's 0-4. Like, yes, but also Penn State's 0-4 and still like a pretty good football team in the same way that Nebraska was 0-6 in 2018 and capable of being a pretty good football team once a couple of things broke right for it. And I think it's going to be important to remember that like Luke McCaffrey cannot be judged on his first career start against, the 2 years and 2 games or 3 games or whatever it was of Adrian Martinez as a starter. Like, if you go with Luke, you're just going to have to work through some of those same growing pains that you afforded Adrian Martinez the patience and the time to work through in 2018. It's just kind of going to be the way that it goes. And I don't necessarily know that going with Luke and continuing to go with Luke will mean that they view this season as a lost season. You heard Matt Lubick say it. They had no issues with the way that he played. I think he'll continue to build. Let's hear from Scott Frost on just the offense in general.
We're not going to be happy until we're scoring more efficient, doing some really good things. I just got done with a unit meeting with the offense, and we reviewed the game, and I think the guys are able to see little things that they could do and should be able to do, fixing some things to sustain a few more drives. So I think we're on the right track, but you're never completely happy, and we got to keep getting better. I think as coaches you get frustrated because you want it perfect right now, and I mentioned this, but I think we counted 10 first-year players that played significant amount for us last year, and it seems like we've been young 3 years in a row because of the turnover at some positions and the recruiting we've done to get some new athletes in here, but it just takes those guys a while to know all the assignments and details they need to for us to be a little more efficient, and we're working at that every day.
One thing that I thought was interesting was after the game, Frost said that they were protective of the defense against Penn State in the second half. They wanted to be a little bit more conservative with the play calling. That clearly didn't work. Penn State doubled up on Nebraska in terms of play count in the second half still, and outgained Nebraska 300-95 in yardage. Nebraska's been outscored 59-6 in the second half this season. So, yes, protect your defense a little bit, but I think Nebraska just needs to keep its foot on the gas. We talked a ton about these guys just need to kind of learn how to win. True. They need to get some momentum going. They need to get a couple wins under their belt, regardless of what they look like, just to kind of know what it feels like to win. I think the next step is learning what it feels like to keep a team down, to jump out and then keep the team down. I think Nebraska needs to learn how to deliver the kill shot, for lack of a better phrase. Like, put your foot on their throat and then keep it there. The best way to protect the defense is to just give as big a cushion as possible on the scoreboard. And at the end of the day, like, and Shenander said this in the locker room after the game, their goal is to make those game-changing plays, not necessarily to hold someone under 100 yards of offense or whatever it may be. Another thing that I found interesting was Frost said this week on Thursday when we talked to him for the last time, he said that they've been getting different defensive looks than they prepare for each week, which knee-jerk reaction is to question, like, well, if that's normally the case, if that is consistently happening, which Frost said that has been the case for a while, just given the kind of read element of their offense or the optionality of their offense, then they should be able to adjust on the fly a little bit better. But I also think all that youth on offense is playing a factor there too. Some of this stuff Nebraska can help itself out with, like, I have liked in stretches, really liked the way that they've kind of called things. I really liked the play calling against Ohio State, and I thought in the first half against Penn State, like, Frost was just kind of letting it all hang out. The fly sweep to Xavier Betts, like, that was great, and it worked, so it's great. But just, like, think about the last time a non-freshman or a non-Wan'Dale Robinson or non-Adrian Martinez freshman was given a play like that. Like, I think that points to good things. Now, give Wan'Dale Robinson a fly sweep every game and then build a little bit of variance off that. Be a little less predictable with play calling in the red zone. You can kind of help yourself out there. Some of this stuff, Nebraska just needs better execution on the field to hit on that McCaffrey interception against Penn State. It kind of looked for a second like Nebraska had the wheel route set up. And then, he got hit. Some of this stuff, they just haven't been able to get to for one reason or another. And Lubick that's kind of been the thing that Lubick has said that, like, I mean, yes, we're talking about they don't have a downfield passing attack. They don't have a vertical stretch threat right now to this offense. But, part of it is they have dialed things up that they just haven't been able to get to. And then some of it is Nebraska, and all of us really will just have to be patient with this stuff. Remember, Wan'Dale Robinson popped in his fourth game as a freshman last year, which just happened to be against Illinois too. Adrian Martinez had his best performance to that point as a freshman in 2018 in his fourth game against Wisconsin. Like, all that youth, it just takes time to get comfortable. It takes time to get comfortable with what they're doing. Like, I remember watching back through the Northwestern tape and seeing, like, Xavier Betts and Marcus Fleming and Alante Brown on the field. And, that was the one time this season that we've seen Omar Manning, and he was the exact same way too. Like, you could see guys at the ball, as the ball is snapped, they're not full go. They're kind of thinking, what do I do? When they're lining up, you can see them thinking, what am I doing here? Sometimes it's just going to take some time. It's coming. That's why those guys needed to be on the field and will continue to need to be on the field. And I think Nebraska's maybe crossed the Rubicon on that and said, all right, we're just going to put him on the field. There, Xavier proved that he can make plays happen, and the best way to learn is to just be on the field. Marcus Fleming proved against Northwestern that he can make stuff happen. He just needs to be on the field. Nebraska played a relatively clean game against Penn State. So if you keep that up, this could be, I don't know. This could be the rare Frost Nebraska game that doesn't come down to the fourth quarter. So we'll see. So let's get to Bob Asmussen to talk some Illini Nebraska preview. Once again this season, I want to welcome back from the IlliniHQ, the News-Gazette. You can follow him on Twitter. He's a friend of the pod. Bob Asmussen out in Champaign, Illinois. Bob, how are you?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm good. Got any Thanksgiving plans this year?
Hanging out at home with my family.
Yeah.
Not going anywhere. Barely leaving the house.
Yeah, that kind of seems like the safest route to take right now. I know my grandparents are kind of by themselves, so I'm going to go bring them some food. But outside of that, we're not doing much either. So one of those years.
And play safe.
We'll get back to it though. It sounds like we're not going to be able to have family gatherings on Christmas Day this year either. The Big Ten basketball schedule came out this week too. I don't know if Illinois is playing on Christmas Day, but there are going to be 4 Christmas Day Big Ten basketball games. Nebraska's playing in one of them. That's going to be interesting. Usually Christmas Day is NBA basketball. This year we're going to have some Big Ten basketball. That'll be fun.
Why not?
Yeah.
Right? Why
Yeah,
not?
that's true. In this crazy year, why not? Well, Illinois is coming to Nebraska this weekend. Last year, I would say the game last year shocked a lot of people here. I don't know how many people in Illinois it shocked. It was probably, if it did, it was a pleasant surprise for people in Illinois. Nebraska had to claw its way back into that game. It was a 34 Nebraska win last year. Illinois showed some good things, but this season Illinois lost a bunch of returning production off of last year's team. We'll talk about the start. We'll talk about kind of what's going on with them on defense, which has been, obviously Lovie Smith's calling card for a long time as a head coach. But where I want to start with you first, what's going on with their situation? They played Wisconsin in week 1. They had a bunch of COVID guys that had to miss week 2. Brandon Peters, I believe, is now cleared and ready to come back. He's available for this game out of COVID protocol. What's going on with them situationally? How many guys are out right now? How many guys are going to be cleared to come back? What's the status of this team right now?
Other than guys that are actually injured, they're back to full go in terms of COVID. So they had 12 guys that were out 2 games because of contact tracing. So 12 guys, important guys, some really important guys. Starting center Doug Kramer, backup quarterback Isaiah Williams, the kicker James McCorder just made a game winner against Rutgers. As you mentioned, Peters, who missed 3 games. So 2 guys got COVID. They actually got it. And so they have to sit out 21 days. So they missed 3 games. So that's Peters and the backup tight end. And so that's kind of where they are. So everybody's ready to go this week. Let's add other cases, and they're really, really reluctant to talk about anything going on there COVID-wise. We're not getting any kind of reports other than what happened with that because you knew the guys weren't playing. They had to say something, but they were really holding everything close to the vest, which is kind of Lovie Smith's way.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way that he played his quarterback situation this week. Because, like you said, Brandon Peters is available again. Isaiah Williams obviously had, a standout week last week at quarterback. What kind of insight can you offer for what's going on with their quarterback? Who do you expect to play?
Brandon Peters will start, and he'll play the bulk of the game. I think Isaiah Williams will be in there at some point, maybe early, maybe not. It kind of depends on the flow of the game. If Illinois is playing well, and Brandon Peters is part of the reason for that, he will not come out. So they've learned from kind of, you can't pull the guy in and out of the lineup and be successful. So I think Brandon he's definitely going to start. I have no question about that. And I believe Williams will play some. I think the Illinois coaches desperately wanted Nebraska coaches to think it could be one or the other. They would want them to think that they should not, and they probably know better. They should not think that because really there's going to be Brandon Peters is going to start. He by far gives Illinois the best chance to be competitive in this game. To me, it's not even close. So as good as Isaiah Williams was last week, you have to consider the opponent. You have to consider the fact that I assume Rutgers weren't all that ready for him. Maybe they were, but I kind of doubt it. But Nebraska will be ready, but he's not going to be as effective against Nebraska. And frankly, defensively, he fits Nebraska's defense strength to me better than Peters does because Peters can run and throw.
So that's what you think is the difference between the two of them, because if you look at Isaiah Williams' line, it was he had 97 rushing yards, but then he was 7 for 18 throwing it for only 104 yards. That one-dimensional element of his game, you think is going to allow Peters to come back in and be the starter?
No question. And I think Isaiah over time will be a great quarterback. I really do think he's got the potential. But right now, he's just kind of learning his way through it. He's had one college start, and it's, he obviously went well, but the passing part did not go well. And until he has both sides of the ball, until he can throw and run, he's not going to be as effective as they wanted him to be. So I think down the road, a year or so from now, they've had some really good combo guys here over the years. Nathan Schillhouse, Juice Williams, a bunch of guys that could do both. But this guy right now can't do both. And Brandon Peters can do both. Brandon Peters is a much better runner than people expect. And I think actually that works to his advantage. Because you look at him, he's kind of tall, kind of gangly. Doesn't look like the speediest guy, but he worked in the offseason really hard on his athleticism, his strength. So he's a much better runner. Plus, he's a big guy. He weighs 230, 240. He can take a boundary. And so I think you'll see him run, and he'll be effective.
So what should we expect from this offense then? 7 points against Wisconsin. It was a blowout. And then obviously Peters wasn't playing, but they nearly came back on Purdue. And then there was the blowout against Minnesota. They got their first win of the season against Rutgers last week, a 23-20 win for them. It's been is it inconsistency up and down across the offense? Is that because of the quarterback? They've played 4 quarterbacks this year. Like, what should we expect from the offense, and what's been your evaluation of what they've put on tape through the first 4 games?
Yeah, there will not be a fifth starting quarterback. I'm sure of that. That's the only thing I know for sure. But yeah, they've been inconsistent is the perfect word. I think the receivers haven't been great. Their line hasn't been as good. Now, some of that is because of injury and guys out because of COVID. When you're missing your starting center, it's a problem because it kind of created movement across the line and it really messing them up. Running backs weren't awesome in the first couple of games. They weren't great. And everything kind of broke down against Wisconsin and beyond. I think with Peters in there, for certainly the players, the guys on the offense have complete confidence in him. They saw what they did last year when they beat Wisconsin, beat Michigan State in a great comeback. So people on the team, on the offense, have great confidence in Brendan, and they will do everything they can to make him look good. So they'll run. It'll run better with him this week. I really believe that. And what they want to be is balanced, okay? They want to be able to run some and throw some and do what you don't expect them to do. So 3rd and shorts, when you might think, hey, plow the ball into the line, get a first down, they might decide that's the good time to throw the ball. So they're going to be unbalanced. They're going to do things a little off kilter, but that works for them. And again, when you have a quarterback like Peters who can run, that's a huge dimension for them that they haven't always had it here in Illinois over the years, but they've got it now, and that's why he'll have a chance to be effective on Saturday.
Okay, help me kind of square these two things. Illinois is 3rd in the Big Ten right now in yards per carry. Their rushing offense, they're averaging 5 yards a carry. They have more explosive pass plays, 20-yard, pass plays than any other team in the Big Ten, but they are 13th out of 14 teams in scoring offense. They're only averaging 17 points a game. It seems they are an explosive passing unit, a big play passing unit with a consistent run game. Why is that not translating into points?
Let's add these 2 words, 3 words, between the 20s, okay? So all those yards you're talking about, they are gaining a lot of yards. They are having explosive plays. They're not scoring, okay? They're not getting touchdowns or even field goals at times. So that's been the problem. Between the 20s, fine, no problem. And a great example last week, Mike Epstein had a long run, got down to like maybe the 1 or 2, but didn't score. And they get boxed out. I don't even think they scored it on that drive. So they have had that happen time after time. So they get close, but they can't make it in. Last week against Rutgers, they had a drive over there. I think they had 5 or 6 players within like the 2 or 3 yard line could not score a touchdown. You can't have that happen. So that's kind of where they are. They can't get the end part of it done. They get all the way there and they can't quite make it. I'm not sure why. Maybe you saw this against Minnesota. I think they had a 1st and goal from the 9 or so. Ended up being a 4th and 48. Okay, that's not good. That you can't win with that. So that's the kind of things that would happen to them. Negative plays, bad timing on penalties, really unforced errors. That's really been the problem for this team as much as anything. You see them moving, and all of a sudden you get holding, or they get a clipping, they get a late hit, they get something just kind of out of character, kind of dumb, kind of undisciplined, and then they have a problem. They can't score when they get close for whatever reason.
That's kind of like Nebraska. Nebraska's a young team. You'd expect that from a young team. Last year, Illinois made progress. And with that win over Wisconsin, it seemed like Illinois was going to take a step in the right direction. It seemed like it was going to take that next step as a program through the first 4 games. Do you feel like they've taken a step back, or do you feel like there's extenuating circumstances that kind of explain away their start?
Well, they've definitely taken a step back, and I think part of it was the schedule. I think if they played the original schedule, the very original, we're on what schedule number 4. But if they played the very first one they're going to play, they had 3 easy wins in non-conference set up. Okay, they're going to play UConn, Illinois State, and then Bowling Green was the 3rd. So that's 3 wins. They'd be 3-0 going into the 4th game, which I think was Rutgers or Nebraska. I'm all mixed up with it now. Yeah. But they had a chance to really have a nice start to the season when they didn't have that. Instead, they got replaced by Wisconsin up there. First game, of course, the fans weren't there, but still a hard team for Illinois. It hasn't had much success against them other than last year. You have Purdue, which is better, a lot better this year than last year. You have Minnesota, which is not playing very well, but kind of put it all together against Illinois, which they have done a lot over time. And then you have Rutgers, which is the one team going this new season, and I thought, okay, they definitely will win that game, and they barely did. So I say they're definitely a disappointment. And really, the problem is, starting with Nebraska, they got schedule is really hard the rest of the way. There's not a game you say, well, Illinois will win that game for sure. I don't see a single game on the schedule the rest of the way we say, yes, Illinois is going to win. It's not there. So they finished 1-8, 1-7. It's going to be a real problem. That's going to be a huge step backwards.
What did you make of the defensive performance against Rutgers? They kind of they came away with a win. They had, was it 3 second half turnovers that the defense forced? Right. What did you make of the performance on that side of the ball from them last time out?
Well, for one thing, they were healthier than they'd been, so that was a big deal. The guys back, Nate Hobbs is back. Important players were back, and they played their best game of the year, of course, because they won, and they, like you said, they forced those turnovers. That was been the kind of a hallmark of Lovie Smith, right? He's always been a guy that produced turnovers, going back to his days with the Bears. That was what they did. They would get turnovers. But it's a lot easier when you have NFL-level players than you are in college with Illinois players who were not nearly as good. But that last game was a sign of life on defense because they got those turnovers. They don't win without all 3 of them, frankly. So they got that going. That was critical. And they, again, showed that kind of ball hawking ability that's been so important to Lovie Smith. It was really important last year. They won 6 games. They lost the last 3 of the regular season and bowl game, but they would not have won 6 games without great work on her turnovers, both forcing fumbles, getting interceptions. I think they were 2nd or 3rd in the country in turnovers produced. That's very important for Illinois and very important for Lovie Smith because they are definitely a bend, but don't try not to break defense, and that doesn't work nearly as well when you don't get the turnovers that they got last week.
They've forced 6 fumbles through 4 games, and then like against Nebraska a year ago, like everybody talks about this one, they forced 5 fumbles against Nebraska, and I think Nebraska lost 4 of those. Is that by design? Is that something like what are they doing to get that? Fumbles are random. Is this a little bit of fool's gold, or is this something that they're doing by design?
No, definitely by design. They work on it all the time. They don't want to just force the fumble. If you look at them, they force a fumble and then scoop it up and try to go. So it's not just get the fumble, not just get the pick. It's get the pick and run. Get the pick and score. I mean, they talk about those all the time. I think they led the nation or close last year in turnovers for the defense. In fact, the defense really won a couple games on their own, frankly. So that's a big deal. That's what Lovie Smith talks about all the time. He's really talked about it since he got here. So since 2016 when he got here, first thing he talked about turnovers. They said we're going to win and we're going to produce a lot of turnovers. And frankly, he knows how important that is when you're maybe not quite as talented physically as the other team. When you can do that kind of thing, get an extra possession here or there, or 2 or 3 a game, it makes all the difference in the world. He knows that. He's seen that in the NFL. He knows it in college. So that's been a mantra since he got here. And frankly, he's worked most of the time until early this year.
I'm going to borrow a number that Brandon Vogel, my editor, used in his podcast this week. If you don't listen to his podcast, it's the I-80 preview. Go listen to it. Illinois is, I think, eighth. I think he said eighth worst in success rate allowed as a defense this year. So they've been, it's been a really tough go of things to keep opposing offenses off schedule for Illinois. And then you look at their third down numbers, and they're worst in the conference at third down conversion percentage for opponents. Opponents are converting 51% of third downs against Illinois. Defensively, let's just kind of take a zoom out and look at it at a macro level. Is it a bunch of youth on the field? Is it like how would you assess the play defensively through the first 4 games? Is this a team that can be taken advantage of by an explosive offense? Is this a team that, like if your offense is struggling, it can be a get right game? Or is this a team that is just, like a little bit with the offense where they weren't healthy? They didn't have everybody.
Well, it's kind of a combination, but the main thing was they lost up front. They lost 3 or 4 guys who are really important on the line from last year. Like guys lost to graduation, and they had a player who could have come back. Wole Patiku could have come back. I think at 8 sacks last year. Chose to try to play in the NFL, so you can't blame him for trying that. But they're missing all those guys up front, and the replacements are not as good. Now, linebacker position is pretty good. I think Jake Hansen is one of the better players in the Big Ten. I really do. And I think when he's right, and that's not always the case, Milo Eifler can be a really effective player. They found some younger guys at linebacker, so they're okay there. Now, the kind of silly, unfortunate thing, their linebacker last year was second in the nation in tackles, Daley Harding. Kind of came out of nowhere. But unfortunately, he didn't redshirt as a freshman, played a little bit on special teams. He could have been back this year. That team with him back would be really, really good at defense. Without him, they've lost something. They're not quite as good. And then secondary, been really hurt by injuries. There's guys missing parts game after game, and then inconsistency there. I don't know if it's scheme. I don't know if it's what it is, but there's something wrong. Guys are running wide open in the secondary. That's not just really talented receivers. It's tight ends. It's running backs. Everybody's been able to exploit the Illinois defensively. I don't know what the problem is, but it's really not working.
I was going to, if Nebraska fans are kind of just like dropping into this game and looking at it, Jake Hansen on the defensive side of the ball is somebody that they probably will know. Josh Imatorbhebhe, wide receiver on the offensive side of the ball, is probably somebody that they will know. What about, give me a couple of names that aren't necessarily like household names or aren't necessarily names that, immediately jump out when you start talking about a team, but that Nebraska fans will either hear from on Saturday or should know about for Saturday's game.
I'll give you one that's really been underused is the tight end named Luke Ford. His transfer from Georgia. He tried to play last year, wanted to play last year, petitioned the NCAA, and a crazy twist. Justin Fields, same school, transferred to Ohio State, was able to play right away. Luke Ford transferred to Illinois from Georgia, same school, was not able to play right away. That made everybody here mad. They thought Luke Ford could be a difference maker tight end, and he might be, but he's got one pass this year. And I think he's a guy that if they decide to use him, he can be really effective. He's a guy that has great skill in terms of speed. He's a great athlete. He's a big guy. He can block, loves to block. And he is really an effective player. You might see more, maybe some on receptions, but more downfield blocking on long runs. And he'll be that guy that might make a difference in a score or whatever. So he's a really good guy. I think he's one. And then I think defensively, if I'm couldn't name one guy, I think I'd probably go with Tony Adams, who was plays corner, plays safety, plays nickelback, plays everything. He's been hurt a lot of his career, but had a nice season last year. He's a really effective player. He's a real thoughtful, smart player. Doesn't get out of space a lot of times. He's always where he's supposed to be. So he's a player, can be really effective. He's a guy who was a great receiver in high school. So if he gets the ball on an interception, he's the one very dangerous guy. He can definitely score He can make a long gain on interception. So he's a really effective player. Plus, he's really good about finding the ball. So he's a guy that might force a fumble here or there. Really is kind of a ball hawk too. So I look for Tony Adams on defense for sure.
I know we talked about the offense kind of exhaustively to open, but like now that you've brought up Luke Ford, I'm thinking about it. I'm looking at their numbers. They've got a wide receiver in Brian Hightower that's averaging 20 yards a catch.
Miami transfer, right? Good player.
Imitor Bebe, obviously. Like, is this a passing game that is just kind of like waiting for something to pop? And now that Brandon Peters is back and can be part of it, like, is that something that they talked about this week, that they feel like they're maybe ready to pop or like do one of those games?
Yeah, Josh and Brandon Peters have a great connection. They did last year. They were so effective together when they were all both on the field. So yeah, I think Josh is a player that could be. He could have a big game. Look back at the Michigan State last year. I think he had 170 yards against them. They don't win the game without him. He had a big play against Wisconsin to seal the game. So yeah, he's a really effective player, and him and Brandon on the same page. So yeah, I think you'll see Brandon. He's kind of a safety blanket for Brandon. Brandon knows that if I throw the ball to Josh, he's going to catch it. Or if he doesn't catch it, he'll make sure that the other guy doesn't catch it. So he's and he plays a really good athlete. Great leap. It's one of the. I'm sure he's got the highest vertical in the team by far. He's a guy that has pro prospects definitely, and he's a guy that really kind of got lost at USC, but at Illinois kind of found a new home and has done really well. Again, very interesting guy. His brother's on team at tight end and also a pretty good player, Daniel. So I think you'll see Josh. I wouldn't be at all surprised, just to make Nebraska aware of this, that Josh gets ball early a lot, maybe 2 or 3 passes the first drive, just to make sure Nebraska knows you got to stop number 9. Make sure you get out there and try to follow him around, because that's what it will open up things for everybody else.
Okay, let's kind of deconstruct 2 hypothetical wins. So you're sitting there Saturday night, Illinois has won. What are 2 or 3 things that will need to have happened for Illinois to win this game?
Oh, it's pretty easy. The turnover battle will have been won by Illinois, and maybe not by a little, maybe by a lot, maybe 4-1 or 5-2 or 6-3, whatever. It has to be by a couple. They'll have done that and taken advantage of those. And the other thing you'll see is Brandon Peters will have played well. They don't win the game without him having a really solid quarterback rating, positive yards as a runner, really low touchdown interception ratio, maybe no interceptions, but he has to be effective. If he is not effective, they'll go to Williams early, and that'll be a problem for Illinois, definitely. So I think turnover ratio, and that would be one, and Brandon Peters is number 2.
Let's go the other way. Nebraska wins if it takes advantage of what?
Well, the Illinois defensive flaws, which there are a lot. They're soft up front. They're not great in the secondary. The middle is the best part of that defense by far. If they're able to gash them a lot on runs and passes, Luke McCaffrey, last couple of years, Illinois has not played very well. In fact, Lovie Smith loves that Martinez is not playing, because Martinez, I just looked it up, he could have won a Heisman based on his games against Illinois, right? He's really effective. So Lovie Smith is like, okay, yeah, don't play your Martinez. That's fine with me. But you look at what they did. If McCaffrey has a good game, which I expect he can, that'll be really important for Nebraska, and I think Illinois will struggle. They don't do well against the quarterbacks that can move the ball on the ground and through the air. And it looks like McCaffrey is that guy. So I think that'll be critical for Nebraska.
What was said about Nebraska's quarterback position this week by Illinois guys? Was it talked about much? Was Luke McCaffrey mentioned much?
Oh, yeah, a lot. And Lovie Smith, of course, never says anything bad about anybody. So that's kind of his old school way. But he admires what Martinez has done the last 2 years. He said some version of, if I'm him, I'm begging the coaches to play against Illinois because I've just whipped him up the last couple of years. He's right. So, but he also acknowledged that McCaffrey is a talented guy that they respect, of course, and they think he's, I'm not sure they expect McCaffrey to play as much as, you expect him to play. I assume he's going to be the starter. I assume he's going to go unless something happens to him. So I'm, there's a lot of coach speak. The coaches never tell you what they really think. So if you ask the Illinois coaches who's going to start a quarterback, they won't tell you. They won't say a word. And you have to kind of guess. But I can guess pretty well. With Nebraska, they don't completely question what they're seeing with their own eyes. But if they watch Nebraska play against Penn State, they'd have to say, well, McCaffrey has got to be the guy this week. So hopefully they'll plan on that, but you never know.
Yeah, Frost has kind of played it somewhat similar to the way Lovey played it this week, in that he's been pretty coy about the whole thing through really going back to the start of fall camp or whatever we call that preseason. And yeah, I mean, if you look at the game against Penn State, Luke didn't do anything that would tell you that you have to make a change back to switch back, right? He didn't do anything that would cost him another shot at it. And they'll need to take a step, but I think that's what makes this game interesting. The line opened at 14 for Nebraska. I think it's moved up to 15.5. Maybe some people here were somewhat surprised by that, just because the offense. I looked up the numbers. They're scoring a touchdown every 27 plays, which is not great for them. So this game will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what kind of team comes out for Nebraska, and going the other way, it'll be interesting to see what kind of team comes out for Illinois now that Brandon Peters is back. What do you think we see Saturday? A Nebraska win or an Illinois win? What's your prediction?
I think a close Nebraska win. I agree with you. I think point spread's a little out there. Somebody said, I can't remember who said this week, Nebraska's not ready to blow out teams like they used to. And I remember back in the day, they beat people by 40 or 50, and it was like low scoring, right? So they're not there yet. And Illinois is certainly not a team that would threaten to do that either. So I think what Illinois wants is a close, lower scoring game. So I'm going to pick maybe like a 21-14 Nebraska win, something like that. Not a lot of scoring. Maybe the defenses play a little bit better than we think. Maybe the offenses aren't quite as effective as we imagine they will be. But I think a close, lower scoring game, I think Nebraska will win.
Rain might play a factor too. It'll be cold.
I heard that, yeah. I heard that.
So we'll see. Well, Bob, you've got work that you've got to do, I'm sure. Thank you for coming back on the podcast. Where can people find and follow and read your work?
Well, they go to IlliniHQ, it'd be easier for me to say, and at Bob Asmussen on Twitter. So IlliniHQ and at Bob Asmussen. I'm there, right all the time, and I look forward to this game and think it will be a lot of fun.
Will you be in Memorial Stadium on Saturday, or will you be covering remotely?
I will be covering remotely. We decided to not go on the road. We went on the road for Wisconsin. We have not gone since. Yeah. I'm not sure what we're going to do the rest of the way, but yeah, it would be. I'm sad I'm not going, but I also understand why we're not going to try to be careful and safe, and I think that's very important. So,
yeah,
thank you
for sure. Well, stay safe, and we'll talk to you again next season. I'll have you back on the podcast next season. We've done this, I think, each of my first 3 years here. So thank you.
I'm always on. You ask, I'm on. How about that?
Sounds great.
All right, thanks.
Once again, thanks to Bob for coming on. Thanks to Pat for producing over there. Thanks to all of you guys for continuing to listen to the podcast. I got some nice messages over the last couple of weeks from a handful of folks. I really appreciate it. Keep reading HailVarsity.com. Subscribe to all of our podcast offerings. Subscribe to the magazine. Get the magazine. You really want it. Great photography, great writing, great design work from Quentin. Shout out to Quentin. Yeah, Hail Varsity. It's the place to be. Keep reading our stuff. Keep listening to the stuff. Listen to, I always leave Chris Schmidt out of this. Chris Schmidt on the radio show, Hail Varsity Radio. Listen to him too. He's great. We'll be back next week with another podcast. Talk to you then.
A Hurrdat Media Production.